Okay, perfect. So I will go ahead and admit people and then we can get started.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for joining. Sorry, we're just a few minutes late, but we can go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Today we are covering Let It All Out, which is an interactive workshop designed for South Asian adults to explore and express the feelings, struggles, and stories that are often left unsaid. And we are joined today by some wonderful speakers. We have Saarika Rao and Poonam Rahman. So I'll start off by giving a quick bio about them. So I'll start with Saarika. Saarika Rao is a licensed social worker based in California who is dedicated to providing compassionate and culturally responsive mental health care to adolescents and adults. With extensive experience in supporting individuals going through life transitions, managing depression, anxiety, and trauma, Sarika provides a non-judgmental space for healing and growth. As a co-author of A South Asian American Guide to Mental Health, Well-Being, and Cultural Empowerment, Sarika integrates her expertise in mental health with personal and professional insights to support South Asians in redefining their relationships with their culture and embracing all parts of themselves. She is committed to fostering safe spaces for self-exploration, healing, and empowerment. And Poonam Rahman is a mental health advocate, public speaker, and co-author of a groundbreaking book exploring bicultural identity, emotional healing, and the South Asian experience. She is the founder of Virtue Mental, an international mental health initiative that provides free, accessible resources to empower communities through awareness and healing. With a background in psychology and applied behavioral analysis, Poonam is passionate about creating inclusive, reflective spaces where individuals feel seen, supported, and encouraged to reconnect with themselves. So thank you both so much for being here today and leading this workshop. I'm really excited to see how this goes, and I know our community will find this very impactful. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to you guys to start the session.
Thank you so much, Nishat. It was such a sweet introduction. Thank you for all your kind words. As you mentioned, Poonam and I actually both co-authored which is a book for South Asian Americans specifically, where we kind of tackle different topics that are often left unsaid in the South Asian community. And Part of our book is also a little bit of reflection, right? Self-reflection, where you're sort of looking at, how do I, how can I implement some of these things that they're talking about? Or how do I kind of take some time to process things for myself and kind of even figure out how I feel? So one of the chapters is called Let It Out, which is the name of this workshop today. Let It Out is focusing on suppressed emotions. And we're going to go into that a little bit more. But just wanted to set some ground rules before we start. Everything in here is meant to stay confidential, just so that we can make sure we respect one another. We will have prompts where, we would love for you to participate, but just remember, if you're not comfortable sharing your screen, if you're not comfortable sharing, that's absolutely okay. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're watching this, the fact that you're hopefully taking in some of this information is key. That's the most important part here. And maybe doing some of that reflection on your own. But if you have any questions or if you would like to share, we will definitely open up the floor so you can put that into the chat box, or wait till the end, whatever you prefer. But as we're kind of doing some of these journal prompts, it could be great to sort of ask the questions as we go along so we can answer some of those as well. So like I said, sharing is optional. But we want to make sure that this is a supportive and judgment-free zone. And we just want to thank you for being here and taking time out of your evening to join us.
Well, thank you so much, Sarika, for sharing your insights so far. I'll go ahead and review our agenda for this afternoon, or this evening, wherever you guys are located. So first and foremost, we just covered our welcome session, which kind of went through like all the confidentiality and just the ground or the housekeeping rules. And secondly, we'll be focusing on like what is like suppressed emotions and kind of like understanding that side of things. Thirdly, we'll be focusing on mind-body connection and how we can kind of like integrate that into our daily lives. Sarika will then lead a guided meditation as well. And it's obviously like optional to take part in that. So if you don't feel comfortable taking part in the meditation, then feel free to opt out of that as well. We'll then focus on some emotional processing tools. We'll also have some time to um, we'll also have some time for like a personal reflection and a journaling session. And we will also focus, lastly, we will be focusing on just some current events and how we can kind of integrate our lessons today into our daily lives.
Thank you, Poonam. So just to sort of begin, so once again, one of the main topics that we talk about in our book is suppressed emotions, right? And oftentimes, you hear the term suppressed emotions, but we don't necessarily talk about how they impact us and what it sort of looks like, right? And maybe why we even suppress certain emotions. So let's delve into some things that we may be feeling, right? So suppressed emotions are emotions that we deny, push down, ignore to avoid conflict, to avoid being judged negatively, or to avoid feeling vulnerable. We often receive messages through our culture, family expectations, past experiences where we're receiving those messages where it didn't feel safe to share a certain feeling, or you weren't met with compassion or understanding. So a lot of times suppressed emotions come from feeling unsafe, feeling like you're feeling emotionally unsafe, feeling like it wasn't safe to share a certain emotion. So you internalize it and you feel, and you tell yourself, like, you know what, that's not a safe place for me to share this. So I'm just going to deny them, push them away, whatever I can to sort of cope. Right. And I think it's important to remember that oftentimes it is a defense mechanism and it's a coping skill that we've developed over time. This is also something that's really common in the South Asian culture because we often aren't met with compassion when it comes to certain emotions, right? Certain emotions are quote unquote good or bad, right? Or certain emotions are acceptable, like being strong, right? Or being strong versus being vulnerable, right? So certain emotions have been taught to us that they're valued more than others. So that's another reason why we tend to suppress emotions. And not wanting others to think of us as a burden. That's something that's a big factor in why we don't share our emotions. Having people-pleasing tendencies, not wanting to share whether you're upset because it feels wrong to be upset at someone. Experiencing shame and guilt that are often instilled in us as in many of us as South Asian Americans. Fears of being quote unquote too much, once again, an emotion that isn't often considered acceptable. And then, okay, so what do we do, right? What happens with this? It starts to contribute to sort of this like internal and mental list we make where we're telling ourselves, it didn't feel safe to share that I was upset. It didn't feel safe to share that I was sad or that I was having a hard time. So I'm going to take a mental note and I'm going to repress that or I'm going to suppress it. Once again, it's a safety issue, right? An emotional safety issue where it feels like all of a sudden, because certain emotions are good or bad, you also tell yourself that only certain emotions are okay enough to share. So because of this, right, we might feel we have to hide them, we have to deny them, feel that we have to talk ourselves out of an emotion. And this can happen often where maybe we were upset. Maybe you even acknowledge that you were upset or sad about something, but then you start to sort of tell yourself that it wasn't a big deal. It's not that important, right? Once again, that comes from it not feeling safe to explore or to verbalize or to share. So what we'd like you to do is kind of take a second, right, and kind of think about what emotions you have learned to hide or minimize. I think we all have emotions that we've learned to hide or minimize, whether it's about safety, whether it's about, feeling like certain emotions are good or bad, if you can, just take a minute or two to process and maybe write down. If you have a piece of paper, you can type it out as well, but writing it down might be the best option. Yeah, and put it in the chat if you're comfortable doing so. If not, like I said, absolutely no pressure. But if you can do this on your own to maybe give yourself some space to think about what emotions you've learned to hide or minimize, that will give you a lot of insight in terms of, you know, what maybe, where this is coming from. And I think we can explore that together. Definitely deep minimizing feelings of anxiety that often doesn't feel safe to share, right? Oftentimes you're told that, just don't worry about it. Just, that's not something to worry about, right? Um, Once again, I think it's coming from a safety standpoint too. Um, if we're met with that compassion and understanding, it feels safer to share. I'll give you a couple more seconds. And like I said, if you're reflecting on your own, keep this piece of paper with you. I think it's important to kind of look back at this and sort of reassess and maybe process some of these feelings. Okay. One. There we go. So the mind-body connection. So next step in in talking about emotions, right? It's so here we are denying our emotions, telling ourselves that we shouldn't feel these things, um, feeling that certain emotions are good or bad. What happens with these emotions, right? Like where do they go, right? Once we suppress them, where are they and what's happening? Um, Oftentimes when we suppress emotions, somatization happens. So what that means is that we're internalizing our emotions to the point where they manifest physically. And sometimes this can sort of look like a buildup, right? Where you're denying an emotion, you get to a certain point and you just have to release it or recognize that you're feeling certain things because it can often show up in headaches, fatigue, stomach issues, tension in your shoulders, physical ailments, even sometimes chronic illnesses, um, or chronic pain. And once again, right, I think one way, because we can often kind of get confused, right? Like, well, some things are also just because of physical pain as well, right? One of the things that has helped me in terms of recognizing, hey, is this maybe a suppressed emotion? Is when some of these pains or ailments or, feelings come up because you haven't necessarily, expressed how you're feeling. But on the flip side, you can also kind of rule out whether it's something that's a suppressed emotion when, let's say, you maybe express how you're feeling, right? Does that pain go away? Does the fatigue go away a little bit? Do you feel a little lighter? Do you feel a little less stressed? I think that's a huge indicator in recognizing, hey, because I sort of tackled this emotion or maybe talked to a trusted friend or, or a therapist or even journaled about it, I'm noticing there's a little bit of an alleviation and my symptoms are a little bit alleviated. Um, that's a that's a really important factor in sort of recognizing that this could be somatization because I do not want to, I just want to clarify, I don't want to, if you have a physical ailment, I don't want anyone to bypass, you know, medical attention, but in terms of somatization, you can kind of process and sort of test yourself to see, okay, maybe this stomach pain is anxiety, more than an actual physical ailment. Um, another example, right? Have you ever noticed that you've had a headache, or that you get a headache when you're stressed out? Or maybe you're feeling nauseous before a big event, right? Like when you can see that there's a direct correlation where you're feeling nauseous, you're about to go give a speech, right? That's somatization. Or once again, on the flip side, right? Have you noticed that your pain or tension has dissipated after you've asserted your needs, right? After you've had a difficult conversation, which maybe you were dreading for months, and you kind of feel that like weight lifted off your shoulders. Um, Another example is, even, how do you feel after participating in an enjoyable activity, right? It may not even just be about targeting, having you know, a very intense conversation. Sometimes it could even be like, hey, if when I take a walk outside, I feel a little bit better. I'm noticing I don't have, my headaches are a little, they don't last as long. So this is all somatization. Somatization doesn't necessarily have to only be negative, but it can be a way to kind of alarm us or let us know, like, hey, something needs our attention. Um, I like to kind of think of emotions and somatization as sort of like a pressure cooker, where they continue to build more and more pressure when not released. And then at a certain point, it can boil over and manifest physically. Just as I was saying earlier, it can be a buildup, right? It can be a process. It can take time for you to feel it physically as well. Which is why when we kind of wrote this chapter, Let It Out, and when we kind of even thought about writing this book, we really wanted to kind of, shine a light on the fact that it's important for us to take some time to process some of these things, right? If we're not, reevaluating or evaluating, like, hey, where is this headache coming from? Hey, what sort of was this trigger, or was this even a trigger for me, right? If we're not taking some time to assess, a lot of these things can go unnoticed and then build up over time to the point where you can't ignore them. Okay, so where do you usually feel? Okay, so the next reflection question is, where do you usually feel physical stress in your body? Is it your shoulders? Is it your back? When you take a second to think about it, where do you notice that maybe you're carrying a lot of stress? And maybe it could be even a place that you didn't even recognize. An example of that could be, maybe you don't necessarily realize that, you're tapping your feet, right? And that can be a form of a coping mechanism as well. But just to kind of correlate stress to what you're feeling, take a moment to just sort of think about where stress manifests in your body, because it can be different for everyone. And feel free to put it in the chat, or, once again, process on your own. For me, it is my shoulders. I have chronic neck and shoulder pain. No amount of massages help me unless I've kind of taken some time to de-stress. Massages can be, they can be great, but, sometimes those can be sort of band-aids for managing stress and working through stress. Tense jaw or shoulders. It's often really connected to stress. Yeah, that's a great question, Hasina. What type of emotions are stored in the neck and shoulders? Actually, it's maybe it's a little, I guess, a little figurative, but it's sort of like the emotional weight on our shoulders if we have a lot of responsibilities. Um, Once again, I know that it can manifest differently for different people, but generally, they often say that taking on a lot of responsibility, having a lot of, unmet needs or kind of can show up that way. Okay, so just really want to validate that emotional pain being felt in physical ways is valid and real. Oftentimes we're told, oftentimes we can be invalidated when we sort of start to look at this and start to explore this a little bit. But for many people, especially in the South Asian culture or in many other cultures, when emotional expression is limited or doesn't feel safe, it shows up in it shows up in physical pain, which is often sometimes considered more acceptable. Okay, so we're going to move on to body scanning exercise. So what I've sort of realized is I can talk all I want about like, hey, this is how you start noticing, this is how you pay attention, right? But when I'm asking or when we're asking you to look within, right, and kind of pay attention to your body, I feel the best way to do it is through a guided meditation practice. Obviously, if you're not comfortable, please, feel free to opt out, as Poonam mentioned. But if you are comfortable, I think it would be wonderful to sort of experience this together and sort of what I'm going to do is kind of do a body scan from head to toe, where we're sort of noticing where tension is. Honestly, it's just you just building awareness and kind of recognizing, hey, maybe I didn't notice that I store a lot of stress here, or maybe I didn't notice that I don't have stress in this part of my body today. So let's go ahead and get started if you're comfortable. I find it best to close your eyes. If you want to lie down, that's great too. I will narrate and you guys can just close your eyes, lie down, sit in whatever comfortable position you'd like to do. And I'm going to guide you through a short little body scan script, which in time, as you continue to do this, if this is something you've noticed has been beneficial, it does get easier over time and you can sort of do it on your own. Okay, so if you can, let's begin by finding a comfortable position, either seated or lying down, whatever feels most supportive for your body right now. If it feels safe to do so, you can gently close your eyes, and if not, you can also soften your gaze toward the floor. Okay, so we're going to begin. So take a slow, deep breath in through your nose, and then exhale through your mouth. Let's do that one more time. So inhale and exhale. Allow your body to settle into stillness. Let's do that one more time. Inhale and exhale. This is a space to simply notice, not to judge, fix, or change, just to observe with curiosity and compassion. Bring your attention to the place where your body meets the ground or the surface beneath you. Notice how it supports you. Let your breath be natural and easy. You may silently say to yourself, in this moment, I give myself permission to feel whatever is here. We'll gently move through the body now, inviting awareness and noticing any emotions that might be present in different areas. Emotions often live in the body before we can name them in the mind. Let's begin at the top of your head. Notice any sensations, tensions, or emotional energy there. Is there a sense of heaviness, lightness, numbness? Just notice. Now bring your attention to your face, your forehead, jaw, cheeks. Often we carry stress, sadness, or the pressure to appear quote unquote okay here? Are you finding that there's anything asking to be acknowledged? Move your awareness down to your neck and shoulders. This is a place where many of us carry emotional weight, responsibility, unspoken grief, or the pressure to be strong. Now, while you're here, take a breath. What do you notice? Gently scan down into your chest and heart space. Can you sense any emotions here today? Joy, sorrow, tenderness, even tightness. Maybe it's even quiet. Whatever is here, it belongs. Just breathe into it. Now place awareness in your stomach and gut area. This is often where anxiety or fear shows up. You might feel tension, fluttering, or stillness. Greet whatever you feel with kindness. Move your attention to your hips and pelvis, which is another common place emotions can be held. This space may carry shame or anger, or even deep resilience. You don't have to figure it out, just notice. Now slowly scan through your legs, down to your knees and into your feet. Feel the connection between your body and the earth. You might say to yourself, I am grounded, I am supported. Take one more full breath. Inhale deeply and exhale gently. If you'd like, bring your hand to your heart or another part of your body that feels comforting. Silently say, thank you, body, for holding all that I feel. I honor whatever is here today. And when you're ready, gently begin to return to this space. Wiggle your fingers and toes, blink your eyes open, or lift your gaze when it feels right. So I want to give you some time to kind of check in with yourself. And would love it if you'd love to share, if you'd like to share, but take a moment to check in with yourself. What did you notice? What might your body or emotions be trying to tell you? And if, doing this, you felt a lot of stillness, that's great too. That's okay. It's all just about noticing. And that's still valid. And in time, you'll be able to develop skills to have more of that self-awareness. If anybody would like to share, please go ahead. Not, no worries. So as we just did, one way to build awareness is through a body scan meditation. But there are also some other ways that we can process emotions. And I think it's important to sort of, I think it's sort of important to kind of just give yourself, some time to maybe see what fits for you, because it isn't a one size fits all thing. And a lot of it is trial and error, right? You may try this and recognize, you know what, this type of body scan doesn't necessarily work for me, but maybe something else does. And one thing that, me and Poonam are really passionate about is taking the time for self-reflection. So journaling is a great way to process your emotions, right? Kind of journaling in a way where you're writing down everything you've ever felt about this one particular incident or moment, or how this emotion is coming up for you without censoring yourself. Because often, we can even do that when we're journaling, right? We can talk ourselves out of an emotion. But what's it like to give yourself complete space to be completely, uncensored and not guarded when talking about emotions, right? We don't often give ourselves space to do that. Um, Aside from journaling too, I'd like to also give you maybe some practical tools that you can use on a daily basis, because the reality is we often, we all have busy lives, right? And we often may not have the time to journal or to do a body scan. Ideally, if we can put it into our schedules, that would be wonderful. But um, from a realistic standpoint, sometimes processing emotions can even be you kind of moving side to side, right? Taking a moment to move side to side to stretch, right? That can allow you to sort of recognize, oh wow, I did feel some tension in my neck and I feel a little bit of relief. Movement can really help release emotions. Um, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? It doesn't have to be this like intense workout. It could literally be just stretching for 10 seconds. Um, there's also a great tool called the 478 breathing technique, um, that's really beneficial in processing emotions. And what that looks like is breathe through your nose for the count of 4. So sort of like a sniffling thing where you're like, and hold your breath for 7 seconds, then breathe through your mouth for the count of 8. And maybe do that about 5 or 6 times. You'll start to notice that you're giving yourself space to process emotions, but also even maybe, alleviate some of the stress that comes with emotions, um, and lead to a feeling of relaxation. And once again, all of these tools aren't to promote suppression of emotion. It's to recognize and then sort of tackle. There's this saying, right? You name it and then you tame it, right? You give yourself space to name that emotion, right? And okay, what am I going to do with this now? Like, what can I do to sort of breathe easier, to feel a little bit like I can think a little clearer right now? And that's very different from here are 10 tools to help you stop being angry, right? Or being sad, because that's not the point. And that once again will inevitably show up physically. So gentle stretching movement, any type of somatic exercise, and remembering it doesn't have to be intense. It could just be stretching in your chair. And then visualization is a huge and important tool when it comes to recognizing emotions and then using skills to kind of help manage them and understand them. Um, One example is sort of, visualizing a safe space in full detail. And in full detail looks like sort of recognizing all 5 senses. So let's say the beach, right? You're going to imagine, the birds, the sound of the ocean waves, you're going to see the sun shining, you're going to see the waves lapping, right? Are they intense waves? Are they calm waves? What does it feel like to put your feet in the sand, right? So not just seeing this beautiful scenery, but giving yourself some space to like sort of experiencing it in a visualization way. Sorry. Experiencing it through visualization, but also using all of your senses can allow you to sort of process your emotions, recognize what you're feeling, and once again, manage them. And then one thing that I think is so important that is often overlooked is creativity. Whether it's writing, I know I mentioned journaling, but even making or listening to music, right? Like taking a paintbrush, I think for many of us, right, we've talked about painting or doing art, right, or doing something creative, but it kind of feels like something that is in the distant future, right? Or we don't have time to do. But if you can even sort of paint for like 2 minutes, right, to sort of release some of your emotions, paint to sort of describe your emotion, to kind of get it out. It's really freeing. And I think that oftentimes that's a tool that's often overlooked. So expressing your creativity can really help with management of emotions as well too. So remember, the goal is not to get rid of an emotion, it is to explore it and then release it. So if you could take a second to answer this question, what am I carrying that I haven't named? So after doing this, after doing the meditation and kind of thinking about some other ways you can manage or release emotions, what are some things that you're carrying that you haven't named? I think oftentimes for me, an emotion that maybe I carry is anger that I haven't necessarily named, because for so long it's sort of been programmed that being angry, right, or being upset about something is wrong, right? Like we shouldn't feel that way. Anger is a bad emotion. And although we know it's absolutely a normal emotion, there's still a lot of stigma attached to it. So I do think that maybe that can show up a lot in, physically. Um, and that also deserves to be released, right? It deserves to be acknowledged and released. Okay. Feel free to share if you'd like. And then what helps me feel safe enough to express my emotions? I know earlier I mentioned that not feeling emotionally safe causes us to suppress emotions. But are there people, are there things, are there platforms, are there ways, um, or have you noticed there's someone in your life that maybe you will share an emotion more with than someone else? Because that can be your safe space, or is journaling the safest space for you? Um, but it's important to kind of give yourself some time to recognize or to even figure out, like, when do I feel the most safe to express my emotions? So as we mentioned earlier, please feel free to share. Um, once again, and if not, just all I ask of you is to kind of keep all of your answers and just keep them with you as something to sort of look back on. Yeah, Deepa, yes. Being sure that I will be heard or feel safe expressing emotions with siblings. Absolutely. I think that's wonderful that, you're a sibling or your siblings are a safe space, because I think sometimes that's not the case. But I do think that it's really important to sort of gravitate toward those people in our lives, right? That allow us to feel emotional security. One thing I wanted to kind of, we both wanted to make sure we address, and mention, right, is, look, the world, it's things aren't easy right now, right? Not that they ever were, but everything going on in the world and can lead to a lot of stress, to a lot of suppression of emotions, right? Like when we feel that we don't necessarily have control of what's going on in our world, right? Or what's going on um, outside of us, it often feels like the only thing we can do is internalize it, right? Um, and along with the graphic exposure we experience on social media, right, and the news, um, when witnessing turmoil, trauma, pain, suffering, right? I mean, how many of us are sort of looking at our phone and maybe 1 second you're watching a funny video and then the next you're seeing like horrible suffering, right? And we're not meant to just have to get over it, right? We're not meant, that exposure can have lasting effects. And one thing I also want to mention is that even not necessarily being in direct experiencing in a trauma directly can really affect us, and that's called vicarious trauma, right? So vicarious trauma means that you're eliciting, or something is eliciting, a fight or flight response, almost as if you're experiencing that trauma yourself, right? So I feel like it would be remiss of us not to mention, hey, a lot of us are experiencing vicarious trauma right now, on a daily basis, if not, many times throughout the day. Um, and there's heaviness in that, right? And that's something that we're all carrying collectively. Um, and although there's not necessarily a way to challenge that, right? What we can do, right, is recognize that we are in this together, that many of us feel this way. We aren't alone. So it's important to kind of reach out to the people that maybe are like-minded, right? Or, you know, whether it's people we know, or whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's, kind of finding your people, right? Taking the time to find your people can be really beneficial. Because many of us are feeling the weight of current events, burnout, and vicarious trauma, right? So, yes, we want to acknowledge how we feel. And I think oftentimes, there is this invalidation if it's not something that's affecting us personally, but even from a physiological standpoint, it can affect us. So you are not alone in carrying that heaviness. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate that, because sometimes it can feel quite lonely when we're experiencing that, because we often forget that, hey, there are other people that are already having a hard day from the exposure that they've, experienced.
So that being said, we just wanted to ask the audience, and you don't have to like put it in the chat or anything. You can also keep it to yourself. But what world event has weighed on you most recently? And we'll give you guys some time to reflect upon that question before moving on to more journal prompts.
Yes. Um, and just to reiterate, as you're processing and writing this down, I know I mentioned vicarious trauma, but it can also cause collective grief. So if we're looking at this from a grief standpoint, we all need time to heal, right? We all need, and it can be a roller coaster of emotion. And it can cause many of us to experience emotions we have never experienced before. So this can be new.
I'll give you guys around 1 more minute to reflect upon the current journal prompt.
And Poonam, after that, I have one more point. I know I talk a lot.
Okay, oh, no worries. Sark, if you want to share your thoughts.
Thank you. So in addition, I just want to kind of put out a disclaimer that oftentimes we often tell ourselves that our emotions are unimportant, because I hear this dialogue a lot, whether it's with clients or even personally with people in my life, right, where it's sort of like, well, we're not allowed to feel sad, right, or we shouldn't feel upset about our or experience our emotions, because maybe they're not as important, right, as someone else's. Or especially when we're witnessing trauma, right, we can often tell ourselves, well, I mean, I'm sad about this, but look at what they're going through. And while that absolutely builds empathy and compassion, and I think that's really important, for us to sort of look at in terms of processing what we're grateful for, right, I also think that it's important to remember that looking inward and taking care of yourself emotionally can allow you to hold space and show up for others and for the people and things that we're passionate about, right? I feel like that can be, burnout, right? If when we develop burnout, when we've been exposed to lots of vicarious trauma or trauma, um, and it leads to burnout, and then we're telling ourselves that, hey, we shouldn't be feeling sad or we shouldn't be feeling upset about this one thing, right? What happens is we're burnt out to the point where we can't be there for other people in our lives. And I think it's really important to take care of ourselves emotionally, which is, why we wanted to have this workshop.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Sarika. And moving on to our integration and intention setting part of our workshop, we do have a couple more journal prompts that are directly from our book itself. And as usual, like feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat or feel free to also jot them down like on a separate sheet of paper as well. But our first journal prompt is, what's one word you're taking with you from this session? Now I'll give you guys a little bit more time to reflect upon that. So um, our second journal prompt that we have here is, how will I honor my emotions this week? Just to kind of close things off on a positive note. Yep. I think we have a comment in the chat. Deepa said, meditate if I feel overwhelmed. I think that's a great technique. Something I feel like I need to do more of these days.
Yeah, I think it's important to really think of some tangible ways that we can honor our emotions, and meditation is really helpful. And remember, it doesn't have to be all.
Mhm. Absolutely. So to close off our session for this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you guys are, as Nishat and Sarika has mentioned in the beginning, this workshop is based off of our book which can be found on Amazon. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, feel free to scan the QR code over here. Um, and we'll be hosting many more workshops similar to this in the near future. So please follow South Asian Care to stay in the loop as well. And so thank you all for attending our workshop this afternoon. And we really hope that you were able to take away many beneficial points this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Poonam and Sarika. This was a really informative session. I know I found it really impactful, and I know our community did too. So thank you both so much for your time to put this thoughtful workshop together. And I look forward to following along through the workshops that you both will be conducting. At South Asian Care, we will be hosting more upcoming events too, so please visit our website, southasiancare.com, to register for more free events like this one. Thank you both again so much. This was so, so important.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much for attending.
Great.
Thank you everyone for attending. Have a good evening.
You as well. Bye.
Bye.